many people work in procurement globally? That's the right answer. Globally, this is a small portion. It's 4 million people work in procurement, in the procurement function globally. And what I would like to explore with you in the next 20 minutes is how the life and the daily way of working of these 4 million people is going to change. I'm Mauro Erriquez, as Vivian has said, leading at McKinsey our procurement and product development practice. And I'm really, really excited to be today on stage. Not only because it's an amazing conference, I got a lot of ideas, a lot of energy, but also because I think this is an amazing time in which we are living. I think and I feel like I felt 20 years ago when I joined my first procurement job at Fiat. I was a supplier development engineer going out there applying Lean principles. So it felt extremely fresh, extremely new, and it was great to apply this new principle at that time at our supplier to achieve some cost savings. Now you may say, well, Mauro, yeah, that's probably true, but coming here today, and if I look at my agenda of the last couple of years, there were quite a lot of stuff happening around us. Unfortunately, there are wars out there in Europe. There is inflation coming back. We had the pandemic a long way ago, and there is quite a lot of stuff happening on the trade wars. And I had the same question coming here on stage, and therefore I went and contacted my colleagues on the McKinsey Global Institute. There is a think tank looking about macroeconomics and its developing. And they said, Mauro, don't worry, actually this happened many times already in the past, and these are signals that we are entering a new era, a new macroeconomic and geopolitical era. And I like a lot looking about the past and to learn a little bit from it. And basically, if you go back in the 70s, there were already similar situations happening with fiat currency, basically the Bretton Woods system, decoupling dollar and gold coming to life, Vietnam or US going away from Vietnam, oil crisis entering an era of stagflation. And that happened again in the 90s, where basically with Maastricht, Europe was being built. The Berlin Wall came back, and that actually opened a lot of changes from a geopolitical point of view, with the USSR disintegrating, and with the Southern Tour, China opening for global economy. Now, if you take a step back and you think the last 20 years and what procurement has been doing and how procurement was capturing value, it was mostly driven by 2 major factors: globalization and advance of technology, in particular in some production area and digital area. These were, if you really synthesize, the 2 main areas of productivity that have drove and were the symbol of the last 20 years. And that's where all of your teams have been working. And we think this is going to change. It's going to change in the next 10 to 20 years, and the changes start already today. And if you think as procurement has been working the last 20 years, we think this should be changing going forward. And again, that's what we want to reimagine today with you. So now, you may ask, what does it mean? We spent a lot of time in the last month talking to many of you, looking at example in the past, but also looking at example of leading company which are innovative in what they are doing. And spoiler alert, this is not only about AI, so there are other elements which are as important as AI. And we came up with 3 main shifts, 3 major paradigm shifts that we think are going to be relevant and really changing the life of the 4 million buyers that I was referring to. Point number 1, end-to-end valued entrepreneurship. We think that procurement should change the rule of the game in value creation. Point number 2, we think that the areas or the venues for value generation will change, and new one will actually become more important than others. And we also think that this will require the operating model of procurement to completely change. Now, let's start and let's deep dive a bit deeper on the first point first. And what you see here is a picture of a plant of Ford in Brazil. It was called Fordlandia. And it's interesting to see that at that time, Ford, as well as other companies, were extremely vertically integrated. They were creating those industries. Ford in Brazil decided to build, by the way, it didn't go that well, but they started building a natural rubber plant. So everything was vertically integrated and was the way of creating value. Now, if you zoom forward, and if you look at just a normal car today, 70% or even more of the cost of a car is externally supplied. You say, okay, Mauro, that's common knowledge. Now, what I would like to, to push as a thinking is this actually going to be true also in the future? So if I go back to our new macroeconomic era, what we do see already today is not only volatility in many, many markets, but we also see that the value pools, so where actually the money is being made across the value chain, is changing. So, and if you now reflect what you have been doing or your teams have been doing in the last days or weeks, how many times have you been reflecting how I do capture value pools upstreams, but also downstreams? So we think, therefore, that actually the way of approaching the market should dramatically change. Instead of just going there and thinking sourcing is the answer of everything, the question should be, should we deploy capital? Should we partner? Should we build new joint venture with supplier or competitors? Because the value pools are shifting. And we think that this is not only our idea, but if you zoom out, you see many companies doing already something like this. Not only the very famous example like Microsoft building nuclear reactors, by the way, developing them as well, but also IKEA in investing into sustainable forest, or BYD buying vessels for distributing cars. Why? It's an important value chain element to distribute and growth, but also there is hidden value pools there. So we think, therefore, and there is a bit of push, that you probably need to rethink the way you're approaching your market and basically change from procurement the shape of your company. And I think procurement is best positioned to do that more than actually many strategic departments out there. Now, second point, and it's a bit of a provocation, where I'm writing here, long-live cost avoidance. You say, oh, wait a second. Now, consultants have been coming to me and to my CEO and CFO saying cost avoidance is bad. We are going to say now cost avoidance is great. I love cost avoidance. Now, why? The provocation is simple. If you think that the markets are volatile and value pool are changing, I would actually be extremely happy if a buyer in my team would actually be increasing the price by 20% if he or she is securing supply and is actually doing better than the market. But most importantly, if this person is working with my sales department and my product development to think about how to change the portfolio and to pass this increase to my customer. This is clearly not possible in every industry, we do know, but it's more and more possible across industries and actually the reality. So long-live cost avoidance also mean that the way of operating procurement, measuring the impact of procurement will change. And we think that we need to really go away from cost savings because it's a far too narrow way of looking at value. Now, many of you are probably thinking, yeah, I have also resilience, I have sustainability target, all true. But if I really truly look only at value generation, we think that margin management is going to be more important. How procurement can really influence the margin of a company, which means understanding the bill of material or the bill of services of your company, understanding the product portfolio. How many of you and your buyers are really thinking about that? And if we push that thinking even further, and I work quite a lot in private equity, you can also imagine that you should actually look at even another measure, which is enterprise value. This is the number of the day, 20 trillion, is a whopping 17% of the global GDP, and this is the enterprise value of all the 140 companies which are attending the DPW. By the way, this number has increased by 14% since the beginning of the year. Why I'm saying this, how many of you are incentivized really by enterprise value? And if you think you are controlling 70% of the supply chain, value pool are changing, and we are saying margin are more important than cost savings, this number becomes far, far more important. So how we incentivize procurement should definitely change because the value is elsewhere than only in cost savings. Now, the last point, if we think about value entrepreneurship, is resilience. Now, resilience, let's be honest, we saw Ford and their plant in Brazil is not a new topic. Still, if you look at resilient companies, so companies which are really consistent in applying resilience lever across not only procurement but also supply chain and manufacturing, they deliver 9 times more total return on shareholder. Basically, they are returning more value, 9 times quite a lot in the course of 10 years. And we see still many companies not doing that consistently. It's, by the way, it's actually pretty well researched. It's a normal human behavior. There is a lot of research showing that when something happens, 6 months people think about it, 12 months you start forgetting, after 18 months you go back to the old way of working. That's absolutely normal, but that's why it's so difficult. Now, second point, how the world of procurement is going to change. We think that the venue for value generation will change. Now, let's do a small exercise. And again, a small provocation. How many of you, please raise the hand, think that your procurement organization is better than the average? You're pretty shy. I would have expected higher. Now, you know this game. If you ask, are you a better driver than the average? Above all, if you ask male, the answer is, yeah, clear, I'm a better driver. And this is statistically impossible. Now, if we go beyond the provocation, if you truly believe you are actually doing better than your competition in your industry and your function, why are you actually not applying this value to these capabilities to extract value from volatility and extract value from it? What I mean is that many companies have started now using trading. I'm not saying financial hedging, I'm saying trading. So buying more than you need and reselling to competitors or other companies in different industries as one way of creating value. And if you look at some of the examples, some of the companies are here. Some have started doing from the beginning, many years ago. Some are more recent. And if you look at the results of those companies, it's interesting to see that the value generation through trading is actually sometimes higher than other business units which have billions of capital blocked into manufacturing plant. So, and the most interesting thing that in many cases, actually is procurement the lead of this trading organization. So again, we are entering a new macroeconomic area. If we believe it's volatile, and if you believe you are better than your average, then you should think about trading capabilities and add them to your, to your set of capabilities. Now, let's go to the topic of the day, AI. Clearly, I think it's clear for everybody of you being here today that AI is there to stay. Even if I've heard some people still thinking it's maybe a bubble, but it's a longer discussion. What we think is that in the future, the winner of the new macroeconomic area are the ones which are going to really put AI at the core of value generation. And it is not about doing another pilot, but really completely rethinking how value generation is doing. And if we look at a few successful cases, by the way, there is a very interesting article of MIT, which has been published a few weeks ago, which basically say, while in the past 70% of transformation were not successful, with Gen AI and AI is 95%. So still many companies are just trying it out and not being successful. But the few companies which have been successful in procurement, where we see the first pilot working well, AI is really making a difference if you abstract in 2 different points. Clear is efficiency, and depending on where are you looking, is between 30 and 80%. Nothing new to you, we have seen that out there. But where actually the difference is coming from is doing things that you can't do today. And it's like giving somebody which has a motorbike, is not only going from A to B more faster, but all of a sudden you can start carry weight, you can carry your friends, families, whatever you can actually open different way of creating value that you have not done before. And therefore, if you ask us, where do we see this value coming from, and what we call agents family or agent framework, which families will prevail? We see 5 areas. So Matthias, maybe next DPW, we can we negotiate, you can use the framework if you want. We see 5 main areas. Strategic agents, basically co-pilot to help your buyer being better. Second, sourcing agents. There is no reason in a couple of years or a couple of months to have people doing sourcing. You should be doing that automatically. This is where, above all in tail spend, there is probably a lot of untapped value already today. Third, negotiation. Imagine you have Kralik and John Nash, inventor of game theory, together with you sitting at the table. That's what you need to have. There are solutions out there. And purchasing agents to take out all of the operational work. A whopping 60% of the 4 million out there are doing pure operational work. If you think 2.4 million are punching POs in SAP or Oracle, that's not really value adding. That should go away. And last but not least, an area which is clearly a net new versus the past is value preservation. Now, everybody knows the concept of Maverick. Tapping value from maverick spend is super difficult without AI. That's where we are going to see a lot of value. By the way, our point of view is the last one is paying the bill for all of the others. If you find a way to tap into maverick spend, that's net new value, and with that you can finance all of the rest. Now, you may say, and you may probably ask, but do you really believe it's going to happen? The short answer is yes. AI is a foundational capability like internet was in the 90s, and therefore is going to stay, is going to be there. Is there a bubble? I'm not going to answer. Maybe yes, maybe not. But we do think, and we've done a lot of research, that the value add is going to be enormous, 8 trillion, which is more than internet has added to the global economy. You may have seen, I didn't speak about sustainability. We truly believe still sustainability is there as a value creation. We do see a shift from pure, doing it because it's an hype to focusing on smart and affordable sustainability, and above all, decarbonization. That's where I think all of you can play an important role. I think it's not net new, but it's going to be an important element over the next 10 years. Now, if you look at all of these, including trading, changing through agents, and also thinking about value chain differently, it's clear that the operating model will be completely different. And we think that actually you need to really start procurement and redesign it from scratch. That's not me designing, but probably I could be doing that on a white paper, piece of paper. We think that additionally implementing some of those elements is not going to be enough. And without quoting who, but some of the clients we're working with, they basically are saying, I needed to change a lot of my process and technology, but also 70% of my people to make it happen. So that requires really changing completely procurement. And we see the future having almost 3 pillars. Point number 1, fully automatic procurement. There is no reason on earth that there's not going to be a large share of what you're doing fully automatic. By the way, there are very famous examples. If you look at what happened with the New York Stock Exchange, it has happened already. That was actually a buying, selling organization with a lot of people. Now there is nobody, there are computers. Now that's going to happen. You need to force it. It's not going to happen by itself. Second, we think there is going to be what we call the liquid core. We don't like the name agile because it's been overhyped. We think that actually the old category organization, as we know, with category teams, is probably going to disappear because through AI, actually the value of expertise is going down quite a lot, and therefore you can actually rather use strong people with a lot of project management capabilities flying around. And you will need, for the topics I mentioned before, a very strong strategic core, people which are actually extremely good in business building, in M&A, and different topics than they are today. So, and talking about that and capabilities, if tech is the table stake, and we are going to outsource quite a lot of, or automate quite a lot of the spend, actually human relationship management with your internal business partner and with your external supplier is going to become more important. Now, you may say this is clear, but if you think about it, how much are you putting time in developing your organization to become a better relationship manager? Are you incentivizing your team to do so? And we are actually looking at that in hiring. Second question is that we think that the role of the buyer is going to become far more about digging data. Because if GenAI is taking over part of the analytics and even part of, through agents of the doing, finding the right data is going to be the source of distinctiveness. And if this, that's nothing new in trading, by the way, is actually how people make money, is information asymmetry. But if you think also about that, how much time are your buyers spending time in saying, I need to find data versus complaining that the data is poor? And that brings to the last point, which I think poor master data is actually not a reason not to get into this revolution, but it's actually the reason of doing it. Because if data is poor, that means there is a lot of value to be captured. And therefore, from a talent acquisition point of view, I got a lot of questions today in different sessions about that. We think that the talent acquisition is going to change dramatically, and the type of profile you need is also different. And it's going to be clearly focused about digital capabilities in data science, data engineering, and as I said before, human relationship capabilities. So the profile is changing dramatically. Now, the small problem here is that you are not the only one and not the only function having this as a target. So the war for talent is going to become extremely hyped and extremely relevant. And this brings me to the last point. Now, this is quite a lot of change. When I was discussing about this idea with another colleague and another CPO, he said, Mauro, you're a typical consultant. Now I'm even more stressed. I had already a lot to do. Now I have even more to do. So how do we do it? That's actually one way of looking at it. We look at it as actually a positive thing, because we think, and that's the excitement coming from, we think the next 10, 20 years are going to be extremely changing, and a lot of different things will happen if the leaders pave the way. The most important thing, also if you look in the past, in all of this macroeconomical area, many companies succeeded and they captured a really high share of value in that period for the 20, 30 years. Many other companies were slow in adapting and failed. I'm not going to make any name, but you know probably some in the mobile space, for example. So winners, which is, I hope, all of you, really need to take an additional high share of risk versus the normal way of working and the normal day of work. So winners will need to forge a path and actually take risk in doing stuff that nobody, no consultant, no peers have done before. That's probably what is going to happen and how success can happen for the next 20 years. I hope we could give you some inspiration for how procurement can be reimagined. We're going to publish a book soon, in the next few weeks, about this and explaining this a bit more in detail. A book written by me, my colleague Teano and Mark. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you get some inspiration, and I wish you a nice evening.